Welcome to the broadcast tonight, former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice.
So we had been through a long period of time of trying to strengthen the sanctions, be more effective with no-fly zones. Lots of different options for Saddam Hussein. We believed that the weapons of mass destruction threat was growing because that he'd reconstituted his...
But you didn't believe it had anything to do with 9/11?
No one was arguing that Saddam Hussein somehow had something to do with 9/11. Oh, I was certainly not. The president
you were the one who was at
not.
the center, being the access to the president's mind.
That's right. We were not arguing that.
No, but the vice president didn't say, look.
No, the question was, if the proximate cause of 9/11 was 19 hijackers flying planes into buildings,
right,
what was the underlying cause? And as it began to evolve, the Middle East itself was a problem. Where did al-Qaeda come from? It came from the particular malignancies.
Came from Afghanistan.
No, it really came...
Well, the attacks came from Afghanistan.
The attacks came from Afghanistan, but al-Qaeda was in exile in Afghanistan or Sudan.
Right.
Their home was to be Saudi Arabia and the Middle East as a whole. And so this became about how to have a more stable Middle East from which threats would not come. And in that context, Saddam Hussein and his growing threat was an issue.
The argument is made that if, in fact, we hadn't attacked Iraq, and you had a different attitude about Saddam Hussein and his threat, and we'd stayed in Afghanistan, we would have probably not been in the place we are today. And secondly, we probably would have killed or captured Osama bin Laden.
Well, I can't tell you how much I think that's just the...
Just what? Just what? Just what?
Not right. Well, I can tell you that at the time, what the President of the United States said is he said, I have to protect the country. And what you can do, what can we do that is legal and within our treaty obligations to protect the country? And a whole array of programs came out of that. And I have heard multiple CIA directors say, and I have every reason to believe them, that we saved lives with the information that was gleaned. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was, after all, the mastermind of 9/11.
And he gave us information that prevented further attacks.
I will tell you something. Before his capture and before the capture of Abu Zubaydah and some others, trying to figure out what al-Qaeda was doing and how they were doing it and what might come next was like being in a dark room with 12 doors that you didn't know which door was going to pop open and what was going to come out of it.
So you felt like you were almost flying blind?
Absolutely. Because what we knew about how they operated and what they might be planning and how their networks worked and how their financing worked was really very, very minimal.
From al-Qaeda, do I hear you saying that you think history will be kind to the decision to go into Iraq? Because what? Because if you look at Saddam Hussein, Iraq is geostrategically the most important country in the Middle East. It sits there as a buffer to Iran. It has 7 important neighbors. It's geostrategically the most important. Now, let me ask you a question, Charlie. You can have that geostrategically most important country run by a homicidal, barbaric dictator who has 300,000 of his people in mass graves, seeks weapons of mass destruction, has used them against his neighbors and his own people, is an implacable enemy of the United States, has dragged the United States into war 3 times, or you can go through the undeniably painful and difficult process that we went through to liberate Iraq, and nobody's ever going to bring back the lives that we've lost, and I understand that. But you can trade that Saddam Hussein for a multi-ethnic, multi-sectarian government that is a friend of the United States, that is not going to attack its neighbors, that is going to be a bulwark against Iran, and that is going to be the first functioning democracy really in the heart of the Middle East. And I say that's a trade-up strategically. And the United States is... And whatever the cost, whatever, and beyond lives in terms of options and omissions and things that we might have done otherwise, and America's credibility around the world, it was worth it.
Well,
as far as the Secretary of State
yes,
and the National Security Advisor believes.
Because history has a long tail. And the fact that this Iraq is a different Iraq geostrategically, a friend of the United States and democratic and non-sectarian and not going to attack its neighbors, is going to make for a better Middle East, and that will make us safer. Now, when you asked earlier, Ryan Crocker said a lot of what's important in Iraq is still to happen.
Right.
I think that's absolutely true. But the trend lines are in a very good direction.
Okay. George Bush. Do you understand how the country apparently sees him in terms of poll numbers, in terms of sort of expressed hostility?
Well, again, he had to do very, very difficult things, and sometimes that's not popular. But what I wished people could see was I wish people could see a cabinet officer who would go into the Oval Office and give a presentation, and it was the president who came to the one strategic point that cabinet officer had forgotten to cover, or the president with the steel trap memory who could remember what you told him 5 weeks before and said, but didn't you say 5 weeks ago? I've seen so many cases in which the president was the most strategic person in the room. And the sense that he somehow was detached from these
and
major decisions, or not curious. Anybody who's ever gone in to brief him would tell you that that's just not true.